Nelson, before we get into the players, I'll ask you the same question I just asked Carlin. If you could have $10,000, no strings attached right away, or $100 for every time someone lies to you over the next 2 weeks, which would you take?
Well, I'm gonna go with. I'm a believer that our world is going in a good direction, in a better direction. I'm gonna take the $10,000.
There you go.
I suspect you and Carlin are much better people than I am, but I'm glad to hear about that you're taking the positive route. So let's go ahead and get into the roster. Obviously, the NHL draft lottery is coming up at the end of next week. And so before we start worrying about who the Kings should take or who the Kings might take, I thought it would be instructive for Kings fans to take a moment and look at the roster and see who's even on the team right now, what their contract situations are. So for right now, we're just going to focus on the forwards that are currently under contract next season. That is the 2020-21 season, and that includes Kopitar, Brown, Carter, Iafallo, Kempe, Lizotte, Velarde, Moore, Amadio, and Ferk. Now I'm going to start from the bottom, Nelson, and any of you in the chat room, and that is the Twitch chat room. If you're on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, we will not be able to see your comments. So if you want to ask a question, go ahead and join us on the Twitch channel. That's twitch.tv/LA Kings.
I'll be monitoring that for y'all here.
Carlin will be taking a look at that. So, Nelson, let's start with Gabriel Velarde. He only plays a handful of games at the end of the season, but how likely is it that he will strongly compete for a spot this coming season?
Extremely high. Real likely. I mean, you know, we were so excited to see Gabe get back and get his feet under him and, you know, start playing hockey. What a long stretch of going through all the things he had to. And, you know, once he got up to the Kings, his 10 games was, I thought, good to really good. He started to, you know, figure out kind of where he, you know, the league a little bit. I mean, he's only 10 games, but I think we and fans and everybody, coaches, got to see what a lot of the uptick in Gabe's all about. And we were excited in a lot of the things we saw. And, you know, moving forward, we do have a lot of excitement for the player.
Now, players like Kopitar, Brown, and Iafallo, that's, you know, your leading scorers, your top line. It seems pretty clear that those players will be back and probably in similar roles. But players like Trevor Moore and Blake Lizotte, newcomers, whether it's undrafted free agents like Lizotte or players acquired in a trade like Trevor Moore, have they shown enough in this one season to be considered part of that group that has to lose a spot more than they have to earn a spot?
Yeah, you're probably right. I mean, obviously Todd McClellan was going to be the guy, you know, trying to really, you know, he'll be the one putting his lineup in place. But I think you're correct on that, Jesse. I mean, the thing is with Lizotte, he showed why we all love this game. I mean, here's a kid who comes in and he's undersized and everyone's counting him out, and he did exactly what you want everybody to be like. He just went after and he took a spot away from, you know, maybe somebody else. People counted him out, said he can't play, he's too small, can't do this. But every shift he just competes and works and works. And where we are as a team, we want players like that. We want players to come in and have that competitive nature to them, and you know that trickles down through your lineup. I mean, believe me, a lot of the older players, you know, when they're playing with Blake or he's on our team, it helped them as well. So Blake did something that we need, and God, I'm so happy for him and so excited to watch a player like him. Now, Trevor Moore, I think he's kind of getting, you know, into that area of his career where, you know, he's played a little enough in the league now to figure it out. He knows kind of what it's all about. You know, sure, he gets traded to us. He wasn't here for a long time, but again, he brought us something that we wanted. We wanted more speed, a little bit more pace in our play, skill, a little bit of skill. So, you know, I think he's kind of entering those years in his career where he wants to establish himself as a regular, and I think he's going to be able to do that. I think he was a player that can help our team just because of some of the assets I mentioned.
One of the challenges of constructing a roster when you have so many young players is trying to make sure that you have the right players in the right spot. And, you can go from having not enough players to having far too many. And obviously the Kings' success in 2012 and 2014, part of it was predicated around center depth. Now you've got Anze Kopitar, potentially Jeff Carter, Blake Lizotte, Gabe Velarde, Mike Amadio, and then you have all the younger players, whether it's Kupari or Turcotte or Madden, who play center. Is everybody who's currently slotted in at the pivot going to play that position moving forward, or does Hockey Ops have conversations with the coaching staff about transitioning centers to wing?
Well, I mean, we do talk about things like that because I think we've done a nice job of developing players that are centermen, and we have some depth with younger players that are able to do that. I think one of the luxuries we also have are we have centermen that can play wing, and that is something that we'll be able to do as we move down the road. I mean, you mentioned we've talked about Gabe already, and I think he is able to play wing. We think a guy like Kupari can play wing. And then you mentioned Jeff Carter at the start, and I mean, I think we got to give a lot of credit to Jeff in the season he had. I think he was skating real well. I think finally he felt, this is before he got hurt at the end of the year, but the first 3 quarters of the season, I think he felt good. I think he was a good leader, and I think players like obviously Kopi at the upper echelon, where he is in the league, but a player like Jeff also helps these younger players too, and the ability that Jeff has that he can move to the wing, I think opens up some spots for some younger guys as well.
Nelly, how about someone like Martin Ferk? You guys offering him a 2-year contract extension. What did you see from him that may have surprised you all after he was brought up during the season?
We shouldn't be surprised at what we saw when we brought him up, because that's kind of his bread and butter here. Throughout his career, he can score, and he loves to shoot, and he can score. Now, the knock on him was, well, can he do it in the NHL? And he's done it. He did in Grand Rapids in the AHL. Maybe didn't get the time he wanted with the Red Wings, but came to us, and again was a great player in the American League, a player that not only was good, scoring and creating offense, but he was a good guy around the group as far as leadership. He really worked hard in practice, was always early, did everything off ice that he needed to do, and for our young guys to see that is important. So he came up to the NHL, and remember the game in San Jose when all of a sudden, I think he had 2 goals in San Jose on the road. And those were goals that just goal scorers get. They were all of a sudden he's in front of the net and they go
same
in.
Spot twice too. That game, exactly.
You could have a guy like whoever me in front of the net take those same shots. They don't go in, but for some reason goal scorers, they just happen to go in. And so, anyways, we need a little bit of that in our lineup, guys that are natural ability of scoring. So when he came up, and all of a sudden the last couple of games when he was playing with Gabe, they seemed to have some chemistry. So he's a player that helps us, and that's kind of why we signed him.
Obviously, the quarantine and the shutdown has affected all sorts of aspects of the industry, but one of the ways that we won't yet understand how it will affect is the Seattle expansion draft. Without getting into specific names, how far in advance have you guys started thinking about, protected lists and who might be available and what other teams might make available, and, trying to steer them towards, selecting the player that ultimately every team has to lose?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. And I mean, it's never too early. And I remember being in meetings last year with Rob and Jeff, and Jeff Solomon. He is, believe me, it's never too early. He is always bringing that up. And it's funny, you think, well, that's a long way away. Well, it's not a long way away. You gotta maneuver things around your roster and your lineup, and contracts are written in a certain way, and time frames and things like that. And Jeff Solomon is excellent at doing things like that and being organized. I think he'd be a great guy for you guys to have on this show to explain all that stuff to you. But
take a note there.
Yeah, take a note. Get Sully on here, but it's not too early. He's anyways. We feel we're in a good position that way. Just because we have so much youth and we have contracts that are now in good situations. I think Rob and Jeff, they've the whole group has done an excellent job of kind of maneuvering our contract situation. We're in a lot better spot than we were, a year, 2 years ago.
Jesse, we have a question here in the chat. Hannah Davey wants to know, Nelson, does not having a draft combine affect the draft at all and how you choose players? Does that draft combine really have that big of an impact when you go to choose?
It'll have somewhat of an impact, and it is a fair question. I mean, they wouldn't have that combine if it wasn't useful. So, I think, maybe not being able to see a player, in the physical part of the testing and the elements where, our scouts or our Matt Price, our strength and conditioning coach, him not being there, being able to look at the player and seeing, maybe what natural athletic ability he has, what strength he might have, just kind of guessing what he might, be like 4 or 5 years down the road. Another big part of that combine is you had all the players in the same spot, and you could do interviews every day. So it's it's a negative that we're not having it, but every team is in the same boat. And I think we're fine because it's just the year it is. I mean, it's just the way the world is right now, unfortunately. And every team will be okay that they didn't have the combine, and we'll work through it. Most of our work scouting wise, and maybe we'll get into this a little later, but Mark Unetti and his group do such a great job during the year at getting information on all these players. 90% of the work had already been done. Interviews, obviously live views. Now they just follow up with all kinds of video views. So, and we're still able to do like things like these with the players. You know what I mean? These kind of Skype interviews or Teams or Zoom or whatever you want to use. So, we'll still do a lot of that before, the fall when the draft is.
There's a possibility that the AHL, the CHL, the ECHL, the NCAA, all of the development and junior leagues might either have postponed seasons or delayed seasons or possibly even canceled seasons next year. Do you guys have contingency plans in place for the prospects and other players to get ice time, to stay, fresh, to not lose a year of their development?
Yeah, we talked about it almost daily. Just because it seems like you guys, if you turn the news on, things change daily with what we're doing with the pandemic, right? Like how we're supposed to act or so it's the same thing with all those leagues. We hear all kinds of different scenarios, and as far as what we do is we're planning different scenarios too. And we know that our players, we don't want them not playing games until January, right? We're one of those 7 teams where, we're not in this playoff race or, try to win a Stanley Cup thing. So we have to figure out different ways for our young players, for our whole team, to make sure we're ready and game ready too. So we've had little ideas, little things that we're talking about, whether it's just things within our organization, or it's maybe just things with people on the West Coast, the other 2 teams, or it's maybe even more a larger scale. So a lot of different scenarios, but geez, we're just kind of throwing things out there, and we're trying to make sure we're ready when this happens in the fall.
Jesse, there's another question here in chat, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
He wants to know, Nelson, what kind of player are we looking for in the draft this year?
That probably means our first pick or second.
Yeah.
Like,
let's go with the first overall.
Let's do that.
Yeah, I mean, we feel we've done a real good job, kind of collecting, players the last couple of years, and maybe more are, favored the forward type role. Like we talked about, we're deep at center, things like that. We do realize that we have Kellyov as a winger that can, put up numbers. We have Fagemo on the wing that can put up numbers, but we do realize that, maybe the winger position is something that, we'll look to address. But also, I just led that into, we realize that, defense, too, is something that we're going to have to take a long look at, making sure we start building a library of players at the defense position. So again, I would say, just like everybody else would say when you're on these calls, we're going to take the best player in that, wherever we're going to be drafting, the best player slotted in that role. And we're okay with it being a winger or a defenseman. We'll just take whoever we feel is the best player at that slot.
I love that phrase, library of defensemen. I'm gonna steal that if that's okay.
Okay.
Before we go though, Nelson, Bailey wanted me to ask you. I've been going on all summer long about an idea I've had. I'm tired of the draft. I think players should be unrestricted free agents when they turn 18, and teams should be allowed to sign whomever they want. He wants to know what you think of my idea. I've been told I'm a crazy and an idiot and all sorts of things. So I'm just curious Bailey's curious what you think about that.
Well, I'm trying to figure out. So in my head, I'm thinking of examples of where that has worked or been done before. And youth hockey does that. You're like a free agent every year. All these kids, like, they're just jumping teams, jumping ship. Professional hockey. Well,
I mean, we'd still have a salary cap and contract limits and all that. It's right. just how you enter the league. That's all.
I know.
Very excited for this answer.
So do you pick so the player would have to choose. So he would, is he going to pick the team that just won the Stanley Cup, or is he going to pick a team at the bottom where he thinks he might play more?
Exactly.
There is a salary cap, you're saying? Is there a rookie cap in this and all that?
I haven't thought that. Let's just say yes for now.
So the money's even across the board, right?
For the first 3 years, sure. But if you sign with the Penguins and you're a center, you're not getting a big contract if they still have Crosby and Malkin.
Well, the player in me says I love it. I'm jumping on.
Wow.
I'm jumping on board.
There you
go.
But
the management side of this and the I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna agree with Bailey. I'm not sure I love it.
All right. Well, someday you guys will see I'm right. But for now, we want to thank you for joining us, Nelson.
Okay.
And
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Nelly.